everyone. It's Sarah and Ben. We are here for a IG Live with Stacey Colino, who is, we'll read her bio as we invite her to get on, but she's fantastic. She is an award-winning writer. She's co-author of the book Countdown that's receiving worldwide acclaim based on a lot of their studies and learning. I'm going to invite her to join when you talk, Ben. It's always the hard part.
Well, I'm actually very excited about this topic. I spent a lot of time reading through the book, and it's fascinating. If any of you have seen press on the topic of falling sperm count, of endocrine disrupting chemicals, of all of these things over the last, call it 4 to 6 weeks, that topic has been everywhere. And that topic is because of the book Countdown and because of the work of these authors. So we're thrilled to have her on board with us, and as soon as we can figure out our technical situation here.
Gonna invite her. Well, you would think that we could do. So Ben, if you want to read her bio, I invite
All
her.
right. Stacey Colino is an award-winning writer specializing in science, health, and physiological and psychological issues. Her work has appeared in the Washington Post Health and Wellness sections and in magazines including U.S. News and World Report, Prevention, Health, Newsweek, Parade, and others. She has written or contributed to more than a dozen books. She's the co-author with Shauna Swan, PhD, of Countdown, How Our Modern World is Threatening Sperm Counts, Altering Male and Female Reproductive Development, and Imperiling the Future of the Human Race. Not dramatic at all. It is a serious issue. With Lisa Van Susteren, MD, of Emotional Inflammation, Discover Your Triggers and Reclaim Your Equilibrium During Anxious Times, and with David Katz, MD, of Disease Proof, The Remarkable Truth About What Makes Us Well.
Hi, Stacey. We're just reading your bio.
Ew. That was good.
So, Stacey, we haven't met. I know you and Sarah talked beforehand.
No, we haven't talked.
Oh, really?
Sean before.
Well then, this is us. So very nice to meet and to connect.
Nice
Sarah,
to meet you.
Sarah often does these by herself, but since the title had Falling Sperm Count, she invited me to join. Very nice of her. I'm the token male in the conversation.
That's great.
Yeah. So Sarah will take off, but I wanted to just say I've been spending a lot of time in the book, and it's fascinating. And I took a look at your body of work, and what I found interesting is that you spent a lot of your career writing about wellness as a topic.
Yes.
And I didn't see much on kind of sperm count and reproduction until now. And so I'd be interested to hear kind of how this topic of wellness has led you over to this more scientific conversation. That's my personal interest.
Well, I like this question. Nobody has asked me this yet. I actually spent a lot of time throughout my career for the last 25 years writing about women's reproductive health, pretty much from every conceivable angle, not so much men's reproductive health. So I met Shauna Swan in 2017 when her incredible paper went viral around the world, and I interviewed her and wrote about it for Vice. Mm-hmm. And that was the paper that showed just how much sperm counts had declined over the last 50 years. So that was my first foray into men's reproductive health, and then it just went from there.
Fascinating. Well, we are excited about this topic. Go ahead.
No, so Ben and I, just briefly on our story, we've been married for almost 19 years, but we spent 14 of those years trying to get pregnant unsuccessfully, diagnosed with unexplained infertility. And we're so happy to have you on during National Infertility Awareness Week, because when we learned about hormone disrupting chemicals, EDCs, we only looked at it through our lens of infertility. We didn't realize that these hormone disrupting chemicals impact so much more than just infertility.
That's true.
Hormones regulate almost every function of your body.
Yeah, down to a cellular level.
And so and then the happy and amazing end to our story is my husband's sister, Ben's sister, volunteered to be our surrogate and gave birth to our son, Hugh. And then my sister volunteered to be our second surrogate and gave birth to our daughter, Grace.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Story.
Thank you. And then we create our company based on what we learned, but understanding that we started working on this business a few years ago, but back then no one really talked about hormone disrupting chemicals. And I feel like right now, especially, there was an article today that came out from
the Global Wellness Institute. I mean, this is a massive organization on wellness.
asking.
And I can't remember the exact headline, but it was why hasn't the wellness industry talked more about EDCs, right? And so it's interesting because it's becoming more and more talked about and more mainstream. And it's validating for us because it's something that we have felt personally it's been very important, but it's also garnering enough attention and enough scientific study to really show these correlations and even causations in many cases.
And we spoke with Larkin McPhee yesterday, who's doing a documentary. I know she talked to you guys. I actually, 4 years ago, met with Larkin and pitched her the idea of doing a documentary on fertility. She flew out to our daughter's birth, but she's been a dear friend for years. But just the fact that the media is now, I think, really taking an interest in these chemicals.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, I mean, I'm sure you're kind of on the circuit right now because your book's getting so much attention. I'd love to hear what's been interesting for you, what outlets and who's talking about this that you did not expect?
Really everybody. And what everybody keeps saying is, why haven't we been told about this? Why don't we know? And it has been this very well kept secret. It shouldn't be, but it hasn't been widely reported in the mainstream media. It hasn't been taught in sex ed in schools. It hasn't been taught in environmental or reproductive health in medical schools. So it's been kind of this black box that has contained all this research, and these connections and correlations have been growing for years, the scientific evidence for them. So it really shouldn't be a secret, and that was part of the goal behind writing this book, was to bring it out from behind the curtain and make everybody aware of it, because as you've alluded to, it affects reproductive health, it affects fertility, but the ripple effects are so much broader than anybody knows. So we're hoping that this is going to change it and help empower people to take better care of their health, whether they're in the reproductive years or trying to safeguard their health for the long term, and hopefully inspire legislators and chemical regulators to do the right thing and protect us, because the onus shouldn't be on us entirely.
It's so challenging. I appreciate those comments. Well, one of the things I'm a person who always asks why do things occur? Why is this topic not talked about? I don't think generally humans want to harm other humans. I think what happens is there ends up being kind of a lack of ownership of certain things. And so those things perpetuate. Now, I'll give you our example. We tried to have children naturally for many years. Then we started going to
IUI and IVF.
Yeah, we went to reproductive specialists. And what I found interesting is by the time we got to reproductive specialists and we sat down, it was more about, okay, this is the highest odds of conception. We're going to take you and we're going to do IVF and we're going to do this and we're going to do that and that. And what I didn't know, I had low motility, I had some misshapen sperm. I'm the oldest child of a mother who breastfed. I just read that section about some of the heavy chemicals that get passed on. It was a little, she's the oldest child. Yeah.
We're both the oldest of 6 kids.
She's dealt with endometriosis.
The fact that we're infertile is...
Yeah, we're the only ones that were infertile. So what I've thought about is, doctors are made up of specialists for the most part.
Yes.
And so if you go to a doctor to take care of your skin, that doctor gives you a cream that helps take care of your blemish. But
right.
That cream we know what goes on your body gets in your body. That's the entire premise of Hue and Grace. We always say, think of a nicotine patch or a pain patch. You put it on your skin and seconds or minutes later, you're feeling the relief of those things. Well, what happens when you put fragrances and chemicals, everything, the same thing. It gets into your bloodstream, it gets into your body. Right. So if somebody's prescribing or you're putting something on your face, it's also getting into your bloodstream. And when we're talking about parts per million and parts per billion, as hormones, operate, those things can be stark and dramatic, especially in a cumulative sense. Uh-huh. And I think that you saying this should be widely talked about, I think my greatest frustration is we get on the other side of our fertility struggle and I start studying these things and saying, why? Because emotionally we couldn't while we were in the midst of it. And we didn't know so many simple preventive things that we could have done, right? We just had no idea. And as I've gone through your book, I'm just like, I didn't know this. And we would be considered expert compared to the normal work, the normal people from an education level. Nothing compared to the real experts.
Well,
That's the part that makes me crazy.
Let me just tell you, full disclosure, I didn't know so many things that we could do to protect ourselves that are in this book. As we were researching this and as we were writing this, I just kept saying, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And so, yeah, there's so much we don't know. And as I said before, we shouldn't be in a position to have to protect ourselves from all of this, but we are right now. And it's kind of backwards, and hopefully it'll change someday. But right now we do have to do that.
Right.
No, when I was going through all my fertility treatments, I altered almost everything in my life. I was a ultra marathoner, and I stopped running because the doctor said the running chicken doesn't lay the eggs. I changed diet, and I went to therapy, and I hate needles, and did acupuncture, and even my job, I couldn't progress in my job because I need to have the flexibility to go to all my doctor's appointments. But I was never talked about skincare, or what I put on my body was never even talked about to me.
Or what we're sitting around in our homes, our environment. I bought a rug. I sprayed Scotch Guard all over the rug. And this was only a few years ago because I'm like, I don't want to have stains on this rug. And then I realized I'm putting some of the most pervasive and persistent chemicals out there in my living room, and I'm breathing that in all the time. This kind of stuff is frustrating. To maybe put it back to you, I want to make sure that we address, first of all, there should be some shock. I feel like we need to say, wait a second, why isn't anybody talking about this? But then secondly, there needs to be some hope. And so at Hue and Grace, we try to produce products that provide hope. Simple stuff, works great, leaves out hormone disrupting chemicals, leaves out packaging. We don't bottle in plastics, for example, because all the reasons why.
We don't use recycled paper in our secondary packaging. We're trying to be very thoughtful. But going back to what Ben was asking.
Yeah, I'd love to make sure that we touch on some of the stuff that you found that was hopeful. Like, what are some of the things you said, some of these little changes could add up to a meaningful difference?
But let's start with the shocking.
The shopping. Okay.
Shocking.
Oh,
shocking.
Okay, I was going to go shopping. There's so much that's shocking, honestly. The fact that sperm count, one of the things that I found the most shocking, to be honest, is that a lot of these reproductive issues are changing at the same rate, which cannot be a coincidence. The fact that sperm counts are declining by about 1% per year. Testosterone levels are in men as well. Miscarriage rates are going up by about 1% per year. And the rate of testicular cancer is going up by about the same rate. And that's horrifying. 1% on the face of it doesn't sound like that much, but that's 10% in a decade, 50% in 50 years. It adds up. And that's scary. And so there are a lot of common contributing factors to this. Some of it is lifestyle. I have to be sure to put that in. It's no secret that we're in the midst of an obesity epidemic, and obesity is tied with a lot of these changes. But smoking is as well, binge drinking. The jury is out on weed use. Some studies have found it to be harmful, some not so much. But the most pervasive and biggest contributing factor is the exposure to chemicals, as we've alluded to. And as you've said, they're everywhere. They're in the foods that we eat, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the products we slather on our skin. So they're really pretty inescapable in the modern world.
I would be curious, because a lot of people know about toxins. They don't know about hormone disrupting chemicals. How do you differentiate between the two when explaining it to people?
Well, I guess you could consider these toxins of a different type. I tend to think of toxins as poisons. These are basically, I call them hormone hijackers. They are hijacking the hormones in our bodies. They're altering the way that testosterone and estrogen are released, or the way they function. They can go too high or too low. And that has these really strong ripple effects on reproductive health and development.
And it can be generational.
Absolutely. That was another.
That to me was the part that was some of the most shocking to look at and learn about.
Thank you for cueing me on that. Yes, it doesn't stop with us. We can pass down some of these effects through sperm, through hormonal changes to the next generation, and in some cases, a couple of generations down the line. So that makes it even more worrisome because last you, sorry, because it's not just about us. You know, it really has long-term effects on our own health, but also on the health of future generations.
I was talking to Dr. Brian Kaplan, who's a fertility expert, and a lot of people think about products they put in their body when they're pregnant,
right?
You know, and mostly just women. But he said actually what men and women are be exposed to prior to getting pregnant is just as important, because he's like, that's when the sperm is created. That's the quality of the egg that goes into creating the embryo. And then also I think a lot of people only think about these hormone disrupting chemicals when it comes to pregnancy or fertility. But the fact that your hormones regulate so much more than just fertility. And so even after giving birth, you know, and I'd like to hear from you also what you've seen, and how do you recommend people to avoid these chemicals?
When,
well, let's go back to
how and when, because one of your chapters talks about not just what, but when.
Right. Well, I want to go back to something that you just mentioned, Sarah, which is sort of the key windows. Men are in the fortunate position that they essentially get a do-over, or the prospect of a do-over. They get a clean slate every 70 days as sperm are being produced. For women, once the damage is done to our eggs, that's it. It's game over. There's no reversing those effects. So that's particularly worrisome. And so that's why it's extra important to sort of safeguard against these effects from the beginning. And the ways to do that are through shopping, you know, making better choices when you go shopping. One of the things that I had never thought of, quite honestly, is just, I knew not to heat food in plastic containers, but I didn't really pay attention to the amount of plastic that is in our kitchen. And so one of the things that I did was to get rid of all of our plastic food containers and replace them with glass, and replace metal, plastic water bottles with metal reusable ones. So I basically just clear cut the plastic there. In addition, we don't really think about the products we buy. So we might look at the ingredients list for both personal care products and also for foods, but you need to buy olive oil in glass, not plastic bottle. And particularly foods and compounds that have oil in them absorb more, have the potential to absorb more of these chemicals. So that's problematic. You know, I can't possibly give you enough useful information right now. We could be here for weeks. But look at the ingredients list of the products you buy, and there's a whole list of things to avoid that you'll find in the book. Things like phthalates, chemicals like bisphenol A. And that brings me to another point, which is, even when you know what to look for, there's this sneaky thing going on called regrettable substitution. So one of the problems with all of this is that there's a fundamental flaw in the system where products and chemicals are presumed to be safe until a problem is very well documented. And the bar for that is really high. So once a chemical is found to be problematic, I'm just going to plug this in because I'm sort of cutting in and out, at least on my end. Okay. So once a product is found to be problematic and accepted that way, it's very hard to get it off the market. But in the meantime, if there's a chemical that is a problem, a known, a recognized problem, and they take it off the market, one of the things that happens is that companies often replace it with a look-alike chemical that has the same functions, but is not known to be problematic, but may be just as harmful. So if you think about avoiding bisphenol A, which we know is bad, you might find bisphenol S, like Sam, or bisphenol F, like Frank, instead. And these are thought to be as harmful.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. From an economic standpoint, companies have machinery, they have tooling, They have all of these things. And what you have to do is try to make the smallest change possible to drive economics.
Right.
And small changes are not necessarily meaningful because you're modifying a chemical slightly. It's keeping the same properties, which also means it's keeping the same problematic properties. So we, for example, when we chose our packaging, it's more expensive, it's a little bit more cumbersome. We've chosen glass, right? Because it's inert, it's not leaching. We use very limited amounts of plastic because you can have the cleanest, just for the toppers, there's some things. You can have the cleanest substance in the world, and then you set it in the wrong packaging. You just talked about food storage containers, right? You put it in the wrong packaging, and you're gonna have an issue. And I love that you made recommendations. I think I want to flip to the hope piece with this, because what Sarah and I did is we looked at it and we said, we've got a whole house full of stuff that we probably need to sort through. We can't do it all. We're a startup,
we're a startup on a startup salary.
People have budgetary issues, people have time issues. So what we've done is we've taken piece by piece and we said, all right, where can we start? Let's do one thing. So I got rid of all of
our... We started with skincare.
Well, we started with skincare, and then we talked about the kitchen. I went in and I love to cook. I started looking and I said, these pans are non-stick and they're old. These are some of the culprits. Swapped them out with carbon steel. There's different things that we do, and it actually kind of becomes fun because we just say, I can't do it all, but I'm going to take this topic and I'm going to just do a little bit of research and I'm going to make a swap, and then you just do it as time and budget provide. That for us has helped us not get overwhelmed, because that's one of the things that we feel like, if there's too many things, you do nothing.
That's right. And this is an area where I say, don't let perfect become the enemy of good. Every change you make in the right direction is going to be helpful. It reduces the chemical load on your body, and that's a good thing.
Yep.
So start with what you can manage and then build from there.
I like that you said that, because a lot of people think, oh, it's everywhere, it's overwhelming, why even bother? But the fact that you said that even small changes can make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I mean, we kind of preach that mantra all the time. And I think reading the book, you talked about BPA and BPS. These are things that you see, BPA for your water bottles, etc. What I liked when I read it is BPA is water soluble, and so many of these chemicals are water soluble, so they can be flushed out of your system. So as you make these simple swaps, you swap over to metal bottles or to glass, and you start focusing on that, well, those levels of those toxins will go away. The problem is there's so much other stuff in our lives that we're not thinking about that it can keep that baseline. We just have to slowly try to chip away at that chemical load, and that's what we try to talk about all the time.
Chipping away is exactly the way to do it. And another thing to add to the list, as you can get to it, is to reduce fragrance, particularly artificial fragrance in your life. And fragrance is everywhere. It's in the personal care products that we use. It's in household products, cleaning products. When I have 2 children who are boys, and in their teenage years, no diss against guys, but there was
14 sprays.
Yeah, 5 sprays. I don't have time for a shower. I'm just going to spritz myself.
Yeah.
But that stuff is so...
I smell like fragrant body odor.
Yeah, exactly. That stuff is so harmful. So like looking for those things, air freshener, get those out of your lives. And that doesn't mean that you can't buy anything that has scent. You can look for botanical fragrances, and really go the natural route on that. But get rid of those chemicals.
Yeah. It's so interesting you say that. I kept thinking, why would fragrance be an issue? And then it dawned on me one day. I thought, well, how do people get high? They smoke. It gets into their lungs and it's instantly in their bloodstream.
Right.
And then I thought, wait. Chemicals get into our lungs and are instantly in our bloodstream. Oh, this is an issue. This is something we should talk about. We had the same issues. We were formulating our products. One of our no's is we're not going to put any chemical fragrance in. A lot of them are based off of petroleum distillates. There's some type of a petroleum product. I don't want to be inhaling petroleum. I don't want to put petroleum jelly on my lips.
My mom's a nurse, and I grew up putting Vaseline on my lips or Aquaphor. I'm like, how did I not realize?
You don't get the connection. You're like, wait, it says petroleum, and that's also diesel fuel and everything. I'm ingesting this. That doesn't make sense. Who told me that was a good idea?
Right.
Marketing did, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
So those are the things that are a little bit shocking, but the idea of fragrance is an important one. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna go back to shocking. I would love for you to talk about breastfeeding. So I was never able to breastfeed. I really wanted to, but just the passing on some of the chemicals, I thought that'd be really interesting to learn about.
Oh, that's a tricky one. And there's a balance here as well, because
100%.
breastfeeding, is known to be good for babies' immune systems and so on, but everything that you through food or drink or through topical products can end up in your breast milk. So there's that. I can't give you like a percentage or how harmful it is.
No, but even I just studied that with the number of chemicals that are in umbilical cord blood that are passed on to a baby. Maybe 200. What's the exact number?
It's 284, I think.
I don't remember offhand, but there was also a study mentioned that found that babies are basically born with chemicals in their bodies. And that is really disturbing. They should be absolutely pure when they're born. And that is just not the case. But then you look at the flip side and, the bottle feeding proposition. And what are we feeding babies out of with formula? Generally plastic bottles. That's a little...
Yeah, so I didn't breastfeed. I couldn't breastfeed, but we had, we bought these the best baby bottles, and then we bought this really expensive UV, sanitizer, thinking that we were doing everything great. And then we read that by putting these bottles into UV rays, then it would start leaching. So like you think you're doing everything right, you're spending top dollar saying, okay, we're gonna have everything perfect, and then we realized that what we were doing wasn't the best.
I think one of our
bottles is a step in the right direction. That's a good thing. And
but nipples, there's certain things you can't.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're getting a little bit overwhelming on this. I think one of the things that we said is what we need to do as consumers, Sarah and Ben needed to do as consumers, is figure out places that we could trust, companies that align with us and that we could go in and say, all right, show us how you do it. And then we could hopefully have a relationship with companies and groups that can guide us to the right type of information. Because as you've implicitly and somewhat explicitly mentioned, in our country, chemicals are innocent until proven guilty. So anything that gets introduced into the market, until people start getting sick or even dying, it doesn't really take the notice of regulatory authorities. So we as consumers in the US in particular have to do work, and it's not fun, and it's frustrating. And that's the part that I think it was one of the founding principles, or the guiding principles for us to start Hue and Grace. We just felt like even clean products were kind of clean washing. There was a lot of lip service, and we're looking at what's going on here, and this is better, but it's really not that good. How do we make change? And so we said, well, let's do something about it.
Or the performance of the products. You can have something that just, maybe it's 100% safe, but it just doesn't work as well as your other products. And you want to, we want to have really high performing products.
That's great. That's great.
So maybe for the last couple minutes here, we'd love to what are some of the things that you found most hopeful, right? I know there's all these things that can seem overwhelming, but what are some of the things that gave you hope as you kind of came to the other side of this?
Well, there are several things. There was a really scary study that we included in the book that looked at the sperm counts of men who worked in the pesticide industry. And a pretty high percentage of those men ended up with a condition called azoospermia, which means zero sperm. They had no sperm whatsoever. That's horrifying. But then when they stopped working with the chemicals, after a certain amount of time, they got sperm again. And that's hopeful. Being able to sort of hit the reset button and have a do-over and sort of reclaim what you've lost is really great for men. There's also a section where we talk about the research that was done in a really great book called Slow Death by Rubber Duck, where these researchers in Canada did sort of a self-experiment where they locked themselves in a condo, took turns staying there for a certain amount of time over weekends. And they kind of like intentionally gave themselves a big chemical load, putting on lots of personal care products that have chemicals, using air freshener, using like furniture spray, basically every conceivable angle, eating processed foods and so on. And their phthalate levels and other chemicals in their bloodstream were off the charts. Then they got rid of all those exposures and rechecked their levels, and they were so much better off. The fact that they can come down really quickly is encouraging. And another thing that really provides hope is, we've tackled as a society other really scary dangers before and threats, and we still are facing a lot of those, and we're not out of the woods by any means. But think about the last time that somebody mentioned the ozone layer. That was considered really worrisome a couple decades ago. And by getting rid of certain chemicals and certain processes, it's coming back. That's another note of hope. When conservation efforts have happened with certain forms of wildlife, their populations have come back, or their reproductive abnormalities have gone away with the next generations. That's hopeful. So we can reverse this. I think there are a couple of times in the book where you said turning this around is kind of like turning around the Titanic and heading to safer shores. It's not easy, but in many ways it can be done. So I think it behooves all of us to take the steps that we can and to build upon them to do that, because it's in our best interest for the reproductive years, for our long-term health and longevity, and for the future of our children and other species.
Yeah. Look, I think I'd first of all like to commend you for spending your time. I mean, you're a writer. You can choose what you wish to write about. I just want to commend you and thank you for spending your time writing about such an important topic, because in my view, education is empowerment. And so you have now educated me. You've educated Sarah. We have a community of people, and we work together as a community that we're trying to educate and share messages like this of both awareness and hope. And so now we are all empowered because we have a little bit more information than we did before, and we have kind of a guidebook on things to look out for, but also things that we can do to take back our health and to really change, small changes that add up to a meaningful difference. So thank you.
Yep. And I think with you, the timeliness of this, I'm curious, had you published this book 2 or 3 years ago, do you think that it would have been receptive as well? I've been studying hormone disrupting chemicals and seeing that it's more and more talked about recently.
That's a really good question. I actually think that the time is right now. It's kind of akin to climate change. 30 years ago, there were a lot of naysayers and deniers, and that has been true of the effects of endocrine disrupting chemicals for a long time. But finally, people are sitting up and taking notice. And I think that we've kind of reached a critical mass of research, and the alarm bells are sounding. And so people can't ignore these risks anymore. And I think they're ready to hear the messages.
Yeah, and these are complicated things to sort through. The book referenced, this is like a 3-dimensional problem. You can't isolate it to one thing.
Right.
And we are at a point in history when we finally have the computing power, literally the computing power, to be able to see these correlations and to start saying, wait, this is attached to this. We need to take a look at endocrine disrupting chemicals, And so that's also hopeful for me, because that means we can get smarter on this topic. We can make better choices. We can inform people. More awareness.
Yeah, and more companies like us, where this was such a personal topic for us, and we're creating skincare, and we'll go to other verticals. But I think it was interesting when we were talking to formulators and trying to figure out how to create these products. A lot of these formulators, even top formulators, said we have no clue how to do this. Like we've never even thought about formulating this way.
Yeah, because the playbook is to go to the chemicals that they can get cheap, and then they can get consistently. And this was, I don't know if you came across this. I'd actually love to put this to you. I have this kind of theory in my head. Economics is what make the world go round, right? Well, we have petroleum products. We have diesel fuel and jet airplane engines and gasoline and all of that. But then there's all these byproducts that historically they just threw away. Those byproducts are what have turned into a lot of the chemicals that we're dealing with.
It's true.
And I don't know that it's intentional. It's people saying, wait, if I convert this to this substance, we can sell that for money, and now we can make more, we can do better. And I think I don't think profit's a bad thing. I think we all need to do that, but profit drives decision making. Have you seen any conversations about kind of that idea or that rationale, how you're taking a substance and you're trying to offload it as many ways as you can?
I have not, but I am not in a realm where I would.
Yeah,
You
just
know,
curious.
as a writer. But that's a really interesting question. And I hope people are talking about better ways to sort of do these, to handle these production matters in ways that are both safe and allow companies to still be profitable.
Yeah.
You know, one doesn't have to negate the other. So it just takes a lot of foresight, a lot of commitment, and hopefully things will begin to change on a broader scale there. Hopefully we'll get better regulatory mechanisms and systems and green chemistry down the line.
That's
But
right. I see green chemistry right there.
that's right.
I like that.
That's
Oh.
we literally looked for green chemists to help us put our products together. People who had only formulated with natural substances, so that they weren't looking at it through a lens. You know, a lot of these people came from Indian descent, where that's their whole heritage has been using natural products. So that's it's interesting. I mean, green chemistry is a fascinating realm.
It is. It is. And that provides a lot of hope. The fact that more work is being done in that area is tremendously inspiring and reassuring.
Well, look, you've been extremely generous with your time. I've enjoyed this.
You're
Sarah,
fantastic.
she'll probably never let me come on because I talk too much. But
I just love the fact that, you know, so many times, you know, this is National Fertility Awareness Week. A lot of people, and for me especially, I always thought fertility was a woman's issue. And the fact that it's not, and it's not ever anyone's fault, but these chemicals impact men, women, all ages, and that there are things that you're showing that the people can change. And so I appreciate you for bringing awareness to this topic, and also, like, you guys have been featured in GQ, New York Times. I love the fact that it's
just getting real airtime.
It is.
On real outlets. This is not like wonky scientific journals.
And internationally.
Yes.
And that is really, really reassuring. About a month ago, I was on Italian television talking about this. So, you know, it's amazing. But Sarah, you raised a point that I did want to come back to, which is blaming for infertility on one gender versus the other. For so long, women really bore the brunt of the responsibility in that respect. If a couple had trouble conceiving, it was assumed to be the woman who had the issue. And now there's more and more recognition that men play a bigger role. And now it's basically 1/3 men, 1/3 women, the causes of infertility or fertility struggles, and 1/3 a combination. So maybe the man is a little subfertile, maybe he doesn't have as high a sperm count or as good motility or morphology as he would like, shape and swimming ability of his sperm. And maybe the woman has an ovulatory disorder, for example, or something that makes it harder for her to get pregnant. And so it's everybody's issue. That's the short story there. And the more that we can all embrace it as a human issue and not a his or her problem, better off we'll all be.
I appreciate you saying that. And look, obviously I'm a man who went through infertility, and I can tell you the man I was at the beginning of the journey and the man I was at the end of the journey are completely different. Because I came into our beginning stages of infertility just thinking, this is Sarah's problem. She needs to go to the doctor. I can't even, I mean, it was so insensitive, but it was so like, but that's the norm. That's the part that's disturbing. And I can't tell you how many times along the way, I would have guys say to me, well, whose fault is it? Right. So it's gotta be your wife's fault, right? You guys are using a surrogate. It's gotta be your wife's fault. And I said, fault is not a word that enters this conversation. It's not.
We have saying that.
Yeah, it's like, whose fault is it that you caught the flu? Who cares? You're sick. Figure it out, you know.
Right.
Right. Whose fault was it that you're tall or short? It's not fault. That's just who I am. It's, you know, it's whatever. And I still feel like I have some penance to pay back. I'm proud that at a stage when I saw my wife breaking down emotionally and just couldn't handle it anymore, I finally got the message, and I changed dramatically to the point where we've changed our whole lives to try to support this mission. Infertility is one topic, but it's a big part of this conversation. I just would hope, if there are any men listening, if there are any women listening who need their husbands to hear it, reach out, because women should not have to take blame for something like this. I've seen what it does, and I've seen the pain. It's wrong.
Well, Stacey, I love what you said. It's a human issue.
Yeah.
It is. And we need to teach our children about this too. As I mentioned, I have 2 sons in their teenage years, and they're not going to sit down and read the whole book, but I've been like sort of parsing it out chapter by chapter. Well, you'll find this interesting, and did you know, and that kind of thing. So I'm not cramming it down their throats, because they need to take steps to protect themselves. One of them is going off to college next year, and he needs to make good choices that are not going to harm his reproductive health. And so it's a human issue. Men and women need to pay attention to this. Kids do. We're all in this together. And the more that we can take the steps to improve our lifestyle so that they support healthy reproduction, the better. And then the more we can make consumer choices and environmental choices to get rid of these chemicals that are hijacking our hormones, the better.
Yeah. I like
your hormone hijacker reference. I'm going to use that.
It's relatable,
it makes sense.
Get it.
We're always trying to figure out the words that people get that aren't too scientific.
You're talking about media. I'm doing a press event tomorrow where we have top editors from Cosmo, Today, Refinery 29. But the fact that, because we're a hormone safe company, the fact that this topic is just getting so much attention, I love it. And I thank you for spending your career and really helping promote this.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the work that you do. You are contributing to making things better and giving us all hope as well.
Well, we appreciate that. We'll take any compliments we can get at this young stage of our company.
At it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. We appreciate you, and we're excited to keep in touch. And
I put up the book so people can see the
absolutely, absolutely.
This is Countdown. I urge you to order it or buy it, share it.
We urge you to order it.
Yeah, no.
Not just because I have a vested interest in it, but because it has really good, valuable advice that will help you and your families and your friends. Buy it, pass it around, share it, share the wisdom. It'll help us all.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And we agree, and I already have all of our family members all have the book because we talked about it so much over a family gathering last weekend. They literally all went home and ordered it.
Well, thank you for that. That's great.
All right. Well, have a great day. Thank you so much.
You,
All
right.
Thanks for having me. Take care. Bye.